Hello everyone, welcome to Glass Half Dead, and if you're a subscriber, then a double hello, just for you. Adeptus Astartes are the poster boys of Warhammer, and I almost never talk about them. I don't even have a good answer for why not, because I have a kill team of them. They're good. They just don't tickle me like the Xenos races do. Anyway, let's talk about a Primaris-only kill team. Several questions. Why Primaris-only? What's the goal of this guide? Let's start with the goal first, because the YouTube algorithm states that if the goal of the video isn't declared within the first 30 seconds of the video will perform poorly, and oh dear, I've missed that. But whatever, I'm trash anyway. The goal of this video is to give you a competitive Primaris-only Adeptus Astartes list that can handle all comers, using only the 6 available Primaris datasheets from the annual and the Elites book, plus the knowledge to fill out your own roster. I am going to be focusing on what will give you the best chance of winning games, so I might say something like Incursors suck. But let it be known that if you just love the fluff of Incursors and want to run them, then you should. And I might say, hey, Dark Angels, not a great subfaction, but if you love Dark Angels, like I kind of do, then you should run them and you can make them work. All Primaris are durable and can get work done in the right situations, is the point I'm trying to make. Now to get there, we're going to have a look at each datasheet, have a rumination on subfactions, and then a little nod from across the room at the tactics. And oh dear, this is just straight up a faction-focused guide for Primaris. I hadn't intended to do that when I began writing this script. I hope I nailed the thumbnail anyway. And why this video now, right before Indomitus releases and gives us more Primaris options for Kill Team? Don't question my life choices, thanks. I've decided to do a Primaris-only faction review for 3 reasons. Firstly, I just think the Primaris models look better than the Mini-Marines. Secondly, everyone knows that at some point in the next decade, Mini-Marines will stop being made, so consider this future-proofing, if you will. But also guys, let's be honest, you've got a minimum of 4 years of use left. There's no rush to dump the Mini-Marines, guys, let's be rational. Thirdly, someone asked my thoughts in a Facebook post, and writing is for losers, so I decided to make a video. The 6 datasheets I'll be briefly covering are Reivers, Intercessors, Incursors, Infiltrators and Eliminators from the 2019 annual, and the Suppressors from the Elites book that didn't get a reprint in the annual. I'm going to start with the basic stat line because they all share identical basic stats, apart from the Suppressors that get a 12-inch move. So their 6-inch move, a weapon skill ballistic skill of 3+, strength and toughness of 4, 2 wounds, 2 attacks, leadership 7 with a 3-up save. They also all have, and they shall know no fear, which means you can re-roll failed nerve tests, and they also all have transhuman physiology, which means they ignore the penalty to the model's hit rolls from 1 flesh wound it has suffered. And they all have a Sergeant option, which just means the model gets a boost of +1 to leadership and +1 to attacks. So the only difference between all of the models is the equipment they can take and an ability or two. So let's get right into it with Incursors. They have an Oculus Bolt Carbine and have access to a Haywire Mine. The Oculus Bolt Carbine is Rapid Fire 1, and if the enemy is obscured, you get +1 to the hit roll. Now this isn't terrible, but as it is otherwise a regular bolter, I can't recommend taking them for their weapon unless you're against an army of toughness 3 models with no save. But maybe the Haywire Mine saves these guys, and the text is on screen for you. Long story short, you put the mine down, and then if an enemy moves within 2 inches of it, there's a 50-50 chance of them taking a mortal wound, for 5 points. Some have argued this can be cool for shutting down avenues of attack, but at 5 points, it just seems too niche. Overall, Incursors just don't stack up well against the other Primaris, and I'll only have one on my roster with a Haywire Mine, purely because I have space on the roster, but I don't think I'll ever actually field him, because if I want a cheap body, I'll take an Intercessor. We now jump to Suppressors with their 12-inch move and Fly. Fly allows you to fall back out of combat and still fire, which is nice. But if your Suppressor is in combat, that means you missed a turn of shooting, and at 29 points, that's really bad. The Suppressor won't be part of your regular list, but definitely has its place purely because of its ability to shut down enemy shooting. The Accelerator autocannon is strength 7, AP -2, damage 2, but it's really the special ability we're taking this for, as to field this guy you're losing one other model. When you get through to the injury roll with this weapon, whether you remove the enemy from the board or not, it and all models within 2 inches of it cannot shoot for the rest of the turn. It's hard to say when this is worth taking, but any sort of horde shooting makes sense. If you know your opponent will take 1 or 2 big guns, then this isn't really worth it. You need to look at something more like Admech, Imperial Guard and Shooter Yorks. However, its best use has to be against Tau, and make sure to target the drone in the sniper nest so that it can't be Savior protocoled, as it will still shut down the entire sniper nest that way. Just make sure you shoot first and get the ability to go off against that sniper nest, because otherwise you will die. So a risky pick, but definitely worth one spot on the roster. Let's talk Infiltrators. They have a Marksman Bolt Carbine, which is a regular bolter at strength 4 no AP, but it has a special ability that any hit roll automatically wounds. To clarify, that just means you skip the wound roll. It's not a mortal wound, so the enemy still gets to make an armor save against you. Now, this isn't really reason to take them, so let's look at their abilities and we see two things. First is access to the comms array, but at 5 points, that's even less useful than the Haywire Mine, as it's only a 6-inch bubble, and all your guys have and they shall know no fear already, so we can ignore that. What we need to talk about here is Conceal Position. It's an ability that allows you to deploy outside of your deployment zone 9 inches away from the enemy. Now, this is a tactically useful ability that requires consideration. It gives you the ability to deploy onto the center objective, for example, or to deploy in a choke point. Even if you know you're going to get charged turn 1, depending on terrain, it could lock down the enemy team, especially in arena. Is the enemy veteran a serious threat to you? Then deploy 9 inches away and you're blocking them in because the veteran move can't charge. This game is all about movement, and an early deployment can change the enemy's plan. It's a great ability. With that said, don't take any infiltrators. To explain why, let's discuss Eliminators. These are the best snipers in Kill Team with their Bolt Sniper Rifle, giving them potentially 3 different types of shot. They also have access to a las fusel, and the Sergeant can take an Instigator Bolt Carbine. These are all good weapons, but the default pick is easily the Bolt Sniper Rifle. It gives you flexibility and utility in shot type, and is also the cheapest option. Yes, the las fusel is great, but all Primaris is a roster where the extra 6 points needed for the gun is losing you a model, taking you from 7 to 6, which is huge. I'm not saying never take it, but it's not the most optimal option purely because of cost. Only the Eliminator Sergeant can take the Instigator Bolt Carbine, and I'm actually going to read the stat line out on this because most people have never heard of it. Because Eliminators are snipers, why would you give them a bolt gun, right? It's a 24-inch range, Assault 1, Strength 4, AP-1, Damage 2 gun. Now that's not terrible. In fact, if this was an option on Intercessors, it would basically be an auto take at 0 points. But Strength 4 single shot simply isn't reliable, especially when you have the alternative, which is the Bolt Sniper Rifle with its 3 different round types. And let's go over those. First things first, no long range penalty, and they're all 36-inch range. They're all Strength 5 shots, and they're all heavy, so if you move you're at -1 to hit. Strength 5 is a great spot to be at though, so no complaints there. The execution round gets AP-1 and 1 damage. If you can see the enemy, you get +2 to your hit roll, which is really good to guarantee that hit, and if you can't see the model you want to shoot, then you can fire out of line of sight, but only hit on 6s. This means you always have a shot to take. The Mortis round gets AP-2 and damage D3, plus if you roll a 6 for the wound roll, the enemy takes a mortal wound. Finally, the Hyperfrag round, which is only 1 damage with no AP, is heavy D3 instead of just heavy 1. To condense that down into tactical advice for you, your regular shot should be the Mortis round to get a kill. If you 100% need to hit the enemy or have no rerolls, or you can't see the enemy, then the execution round. If you're firing into hordes and care more about spreading around flesh wounds, use the Hyperfrag. Also use the Hyperfrag on Overwatch. Simple. Now at 18 points they're not a bad choice, but we're not done yet. Infiltrators had concealed positions, and so do Eliminators. Eliminators also get camo cloaks, so they're at an extra -1 to hit when concealed. Once again, Infiltrators are 17 points, Eliminators are 18. The difference gets you an infinitely better gun and a camo cloak. For this reason, unless you have to save 1 point, I would say that your roster needs 3 Eliminators on it and no Infiltrators. 1 Infiltrator will be a Sergeant to sit at the back and be your leader, sniping as he should. Then on certain deployments and terrain layouts, you'll want to use Concealed Position to deploy your other 2 Eliminators as close to the enemy as possible, or on the center objective. I know it feels counterintuitive, forward deploying a sniper, but they've got good guns and are a real threat that will require dedicated firepower to remove. And weirdly, yes, even in arena I would recommend using a sniper to block a corridor. Not all the time, not against every matchup, but sometimes 18 points that survives for 2 turns and blocks half the enemy's force is a game winner. Now we come to the Reivers. Despite them being marketed as the close combat troops of the Primaris, I actually think in an all Primaris list, you're generally not going to want to run these guys, except for the Reiver Sergeant. He's a great pick. Now the reason the Sergeant is good aside from the extra attack is due to his loadout. A regular Reiver gets a bolt carbine and a heavy bolt pistol. You're allowed to swap the carbine for a combat knife, which is just an extra attack if you don't know. The Sergeant, however, can swap his pistol for the knife, meaning he gets the extra attack and an assault weapon so can advance, shoot, then charge the following turn. Regular Reivers would lose their turn 1 shot as they have a pistol which can't be shot after advancing. The heavy bolt pistol was nice, but typically you will make 2 shots with it. You advance turn 1, you charge turn 2. If you don't kill, you shoot turn 3 and 4. So it's only shot when you are failing injury rolls. Grapnel launcher and grav shoot are dependent on your terrain layout. So we definitely put a Reiver Sergeant in the roster, and I'd even say he's a regular pick for your active list. Now we get to the final datasheet, the humble Intercessor. Let's start with the guns they can take. You always get a bolt pistol, and then you have an option of a bolt rifle, auto bolt rifle, or stalker bolt rifle. Now this may seem a touch confusing, so let's break these down. The auto bolt rifle is the same as the bolt carbine from the Reivers. Assault 2, no AP, 1 damage. Assault weapons are good for movement and are basically mandatory in arena. And as a Reiver should be taking a bolt pistol and combat knife instead of their carbine, because their only selling point is 1 extra attack, if you need an assault weapon, the auto bolt rifle is the one for you. Also, the Intercessor with auto bolt rifle is 1 point cheaper than the Reiver with carbine. Use the auto bolt rifle to advance onto faraway points. The bolt rifle is going to be your default pick. At rapid fire 1, 30-inch range, strength 4, AP -1, damage 1, they're a solid and reliable gun that have a chance of damaging most things in the game, and you can move without penalty. If you don't have a game plan or know you might need to be flexible, the Intercessor bolt rifle is your safe pick. Which takes us to the Stalker bolt rifle, and despite having a really cool name, I can't really advise taking this one. It's only a heavy one, and that's the real killer, despite it also being AP -2. It's also not actually a sniper, so still takes a negative at long range. Oh, Intercessors can still take a comms, and regardless of what's on your list, if you have a spare point, give one of them an Auspex, as removing obscurity on any gun is always good. Not going to go over it here, but the FAQ still applies, so yes, an Intercessor can take an Auspex. The Intercessor Gunner is, as far as points are concerned, a free upgrade and adds the ability to be a demo specialist. The ability to fire a frag or crack grenade is worth it. If you're taking an Intercessor, they should be a gunner with an auxiliary grenade launcher just in case. Do note that even though you can take 2 grenade launchers, they are simply extending the range of your grenade, so you can still only use 1 of these per phase. The reason to take 2 is that they're free and there's no downside to taking them. And perhaps one gets a better shot than the other on one of the turns. And now for the most complicated change the annual gave Intercessors, the Intercessor Sergeant. You can replace your bolt rifle with a hand flamer. Now the hand flamer is free, and it's not a terrible choice if you're up against a toughness 3 horde, but it's still only 6 inches range, pistol D3, strength 3, so it's a hard pass for me. We then have the option of a close combat weapon, which can be a chainsaw, power fist, or thunderhammer. This might sound like you're going to want 3 different Intercessor Sergeants on your roster, but in my view it's far simpler than that. The chainsword is just an extra attack, and you've got a Reiver Sergeant for that. A power sword is okay if you're trying to save points, but really need that -3 AP. But they don't give you an extra attack or any more damage, so it's a bit of a niche pick. And between the Power Fist and the Thunderhammer, it's actually an easy pick, because the Power Fist is 4 points, whilst the Thunderhammer is 8. The Intercessor Sergeant, however you kit him out, is now a must-take on your roster. Whether you build him as your cheapest leader to sit at the back and hold a point, or you make him an absolute melee powerhouse, or something in between, he's an auto-take, and you'll have several of him on your roster, no doubt. Let's quickly talk tactics about tactics. I'm not going to cover every single one, but these are the key ones to keep in mind when running all Primaris. You are a very durable team, but a few poor rolls and you are going to have issues, so the general rule of thumb is to hold your CP back for saving your models. But there are some great offensive tactics, so don't be afraid to let loose once in combat. Adaptive strategy is basically an auto use if your team breaks. A break isn't an auto loss for starties, so if you break, play this, and then get some serious work done in the next turn. Reivers already have a -1 to leadership aura, and as your Reiver Sergeant is based entirely around getting into combat with as many models as possible, and then because his combat knife is only 1 damage, dealing as many flesh wounds as possible, sometimes giving everyone around you a flesh wound and then a -2 on their nerve check is going to win you a game with psychological warfare. Armour of Contempt will require some careful positioning and facing Grey Knights or Thousand Suns to be worth using. But if one of your guys is going to take 2 cyborgs in a turn, use Armour of Contempt. If you're hit by a 1 damage weapon and it is going to remove your final wound and you have an option to pass it on to a model that still has 2 wounds left, you play Battle Brothers every time. You don't have many models, so you need to keep them on the board. Angel of Death gives you an extra attack and it's great to use on your close combat intercessor if you're flush with command points. But in general, the superior tactic is going to be Honour the Chapter, which lets you attack again at the end of the phase. Better in every way than Angel of Death, except it's an extra CP, and using a 2 CP tactic probably means you're taking away your ability to Death Denied. It could be a game-changing play when used on the right model though. Which puts us onto the big one, Death Denied. Keeping your models on the board is paramount, but 3 CP is huge. If you choose to save up for Death Denied, that means you're not doing much else. Now how you should use this is kind of up to your opponent. For example, if you're up against Cabalites, they're going to get a guaranteed kill with their Dark Lance. A Death Denied on that is a great choice, because that's their only reliable kill, as it will be stacked with comms and maybe a tactic. But if you're against, say, Plasma Spam Admech, then saving one guy will just have another removed instead. Against those types of armies that have a lot of multi-damage weapons that melt through your armor, try and focus on offense and locking them down and killing them, spending your CP in the shooting and fighting phase instead. And now a quick word on every subfaction, and this will be quick. The rules are up on the screen in case you've forgotten what they are. Dark Angels, the only way to get a break test reroll in the game, plus reroll 1s on ranged weapons. As Primaris, it's a no. White Scars, running all intercessors with auto bolt rifles is kind of terrifying as White Scars. Iron Hands, a 6-up feel no pain isn't good on a low model count faction. Ultramarines, if Primaris had access to flamers, I'd say this could work, but they don't. Black Templars, rerolling charges is pretty great. Yeah, I can't deny it. Space Wolves, load up on all the -1 to hit weapons and go to town as Space Wolves. Imperial Fists, not terrible, but in general I feel it's overshadowed by other sub-factions. Blood Angels, running all Reivers and Intercessor Sergeant is actually a viable plan as Blood Angels. Salamanders, the default sub-faction if you have no specific plan, and even if you do, it's just really good. Use this. Raven Guard, literally a slap in the face to all Raven Guard players. Ouch. Now that we've covered every Primaris datasheet and weapon, let's take a look at the Take All Comers 125 point list I came up with. Okay, and as a little present for you here, I've actually given you 2 example lists because I just wanted to explain the differences between them and when you might use A versus B. So let's go over my first all-comers list, which I think is actually, it might be a little bit unorthodox, but it's a really solid list. Basically, as I told you during the rundowns of the data sheets, we start with an Eliminator Sergeant. Subfaction is Salamanders, because honestly, it's the best all-round subfaction. So we start with an Eliminator Sergeant as your leader. He has the Bolt Sniper Rifle. We then have 2 more Eliminators. Exactly as I told you earlier in the video, we're going to drop them using Concealed Position. Or if you find you're in a matchup where you don't need to do that, they actually become brilliant objective holders for your side of the board. And if you're playing a mission where they're holding your side of the board, then everybody else can just push up much more than if they were holding the center of the board and being the aggressive ones. Then we have our Reiver Sergeant, exactly as I said, bolt carbine combat knife. You can advance him, still shoot, then turn 2, you charge. Intercessor Sergeant, auto bolt rifle, power fist. He's your combat. Now, normally people would give the Reiver Sergeant the combat, but because your Intercessor Sergeant has the power fist, means he's going to be hitting less because he's at -1 to hit, so you give him combat to make up for that. 2 Intercessor Gunners, both with bolt rifles, both with auxiliary grenade launchers, hence taking the gunner version. It's an extra point to make them a gunner, but it does give you access to a very varied weapon using either a frag grenade or a crack grenade. One of them is going to be a comms and you give him an Auspex, the other is going to be a demo. Generally, you're going to want to keep your Intercessor Gunner as the comms and Auspex next to your Eliminator Sergeant, so that every time the Eliminator Sergeant fires his Bolt Sniper Rifle, it's a hit, it's a kill, guaranteed, and it becomes a very effective model. And as the Gunner himself has a pretty respectable Bolt Rifle, failing that, the Auxiliary Grenade Launcher, he's also laying down some serious fire. And that's it, 7 models. I honestly think that's a really strong team, and although it's not going to be the most optimal team in every single situation, if you don't exactly know the faction you're going up against, or for some reason you have to take a single list, this is a very strong list. Then an example second list is a White Scars list. Now this would be a pretty niche pick for me. However, because you're White Scars, you're probably going to want to use this in an open map, and the idea is to push most of your guys to the other side of the board and really get stuck in and force the enemy to play defensively, having no opportunity to come to your side of the board or the centre of the board. We've gone with the Reiver Sergeant, bolt carbine combat knife as the leader, an Intercessor Sergeant with auto bolt rifle, chainsword as the combat, and then 2 Intercessor Gunners, again both with auxiliary grenade launchers, one a demo, one a medic, both with auto bolt rifles. The intention there is you keep your medic next to your Intercessor Sergeant with chainsword. On the turn that he's going to make his charge, you use your stim shot, giving him an extra inch on the charge and an extra attack in the fight phase. Then you just have 4 regular intercessors with auto bolt rifles. They all have the auto bolt rifles here so that you can advance all of them, taking full advantage of the White Scars subfaction. Generally, I would say you don't want to take this in arena. Although in arena your first turn movement is very important, the White Scars faction is kind of lost after that. So you'd be taking a subfaction for a single turn, which just doesn't make any sense. And if you were going to play arena, even with this exact same list, if you still want to advance with all of your models, I say go Salamanders instead. And that's it. That's the end of my Primaris-only Adeptus Astartes faction breakdown. As always, I'd love to know your thoughts. I'm not really seeing many people playing Primaris-only lists, but they are out there. They haven't really won anything, but that's probably because people aren't really trying to, seriously competitively win using only Primaris. Do you think I've gone wrong with the Incursors or the Infiltrators? Do you think they actually have a place in this list? Do you think there's a really good, strong list that I haven't put up here? I'd definitely love to know it, as at some point this year I am going to be putting together a Primaris-only competitive kill team list and roster. So any thoughts would be greatly appreciated. Obviously we don't have the Indomitus Crusade box yet, but we know those are getting rules, so that will probably change things a little bit. If you've liked what I've done here, a thumbs up, a comment, a subscribe, a share to all of your friends would really help a small YouTuber like myself. And actually, if you're still here, just so you know, this Friday I'm doing my first ever full-on battle report. It's going to be Grey Knights versus Custodes. I've really put as much as I can into this battle report, and I'm looking forward to some feedback on that. It'd be great if you could tune in for that as well. Anyway, this has been Glass Half Dead. I hope you've had a good day, and I hope you continue to have a good day. Stay healthy. See you soon. Bye.